Welcome to Own Your Zone podcast, where we feature venture capitalists, innovators, angels, and other investors who create positive impact globally. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm JiNan Glasgow George, a patent attorney and founder of Neo IP. We're a law firm that helps clients maximize their return on investment for patent assets. I'm also host of this show. On this podcast, we feature venture capitalists, private equity funds, angel investors, and innovators, people who are inventing. Today, I'm so excited to have Paul Gyra joining us. I'd like to give a shout out to Richard Johnson of Appian Capital, who introduced us at a prior year's Eclipse conference, I think, the Eclipse IP Futures Conference in North Carolina. Isn't that right, Paul?
Correct. Yeah, it was a very interesting conference. It was a wonderful way to get into your part of the country, which I hadn't been there before. I was amazed by the broad scope of people you had invited to the conference.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Paul. We'll kick it off in just a second. First of all, let's talk about our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Neo IP, where we help companies increase their valuation and protect their business through strategic business and IP planning. At Neo IP, we do legal services to manage risk, develop strategic patent portfolios, and help companies monetize IP assets. We believe that everyone has the power to create, and that intellectual property is a valuable business asset with exceptional potential. Neo IP is here to protect that. Learn more about us at neoipassets.com. All right, Paul Gyra is director of the Thompson Family Office. And Paul, you have years of experience in capital formation and global investments. Paul, you're currently launching a new venture fund, Meta Impact Capital in Dubai, right?
Correct. We're excited.
Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, first and foremost, I also think of you as a great connector. You seem to know people in every corner of the world, or if you will, all over the globe. Tell us a little bit about how you help connect people. What motivates that?
I think early in life, listening to my father, business isn't just about transactions. It's all about relationships.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I'm older. I'm close to 60. So through my journey, if you invest in relationships, they come back and harvest in tremendous ways. And instead of going traditionally vertically deep in one area of business activity, I took more of a broad, holistic view to try to have a vision with my wife to work in the four parts of the world, the four key parts. So I had the blessing to work in the UK, New York, London, in Australia, Hong Kong, and the last 8 years before COVID in Dubai. And later in life, having worked through all those businesses and transactions in different big groups, I worked at Harvard Endowment, to Credit Suisse First Boston, to ING Barings, and cleaned up a challenging period for them with the collapse of Barings, the oldest British investment bank, then moved into the buy side of asset management in Boston with Barings Asset Management, and also had the pleasure of restructuring firm in Cells in New York, which is a mid-sized investment bank that ING took over and integrated that activity and ran their alternatives businesses for 8 years, which is private equity, hedge funds, hedge fund to fund. So I've had the pleasure of working on both the sell side, as they say, and the capital market side, and the buy side. And now later in life, I'm trying to pull all that together and enjoy my later years of life with working with entrepreneurs, people who have a passion for global business. And one of the reasons I pivoted in this area of the Metaverse Web 3.0 is, like many people out there, they're inquisitive about what's going on. They're curious. There's naysayers. And instead of sitting on the sidelines and criticizing all these young Turks, as I say, trading crypto and creating NFTs and talking about immersion realities, I say, why not immerse myself into the middle of this and see how it goes? So I've been blessed to harness some of those relationships over the 30 years to pull together this fund.
How'd you get into Metaverse? Like, give us or NFT or Web3. What got you into?
I was
first step?
Yeah, I was early on in crypto too.
Oh, yeah.
And I lived in Dubai, and in that 8 years of Dubai, Dubai's a little bit of bling bling, and they move fast in the world of digital assets and currencies. And as Dubai is a big trading center of the world. So a significant part of the world's gold is traded through Dubai. So as an extension of gold and moving into crypto, it just became a natural place to kind of hang around the hoop, as they say, with really smart, whether they're Russians, Chinese, Americans, over Ukrainians, over a beer or two, and just think about the evolution of the early cryptos. And then I moved into, we all heard about the ICOs and initial coin offerings, and I kind of worked through that. And one of my partners in Dubai had built a firm called Global Investment Bank that was featuring on what he's building now called Hourglass, which is a media content crypto type of product out of Dallas right now. So I was always kind of inquisitive about the next thing. And I think that the things came together quite quickly over the last year, and especially during this COVID period where people honestly are thinking differently about communicating and working and engaging. And I didn't really understand that fully until you see a whole country acting in that way and more open to new business models and ways of engaging with people.
Yeah. And yet it seems like here in the US, there are more obstacles to getting into cryptocurrency, and you can't even have maybe all wallets in all states. We kind of have a little more friction preventing its uptake here.
Correct. The US is big, a larger market than the Middle East. The Middle East, as you know, was and continues to be a great place for the development of what I call crypto, metaverse, and related technologies. And it's been demonstrated because you got a benevolent ruler over there. And what happened 4 months ago was the ruler instituted by decree the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority. So what he effectively did, Sheikh Mohammed Maktoum, was create a sandbox for the world's leading crypto players. So we have Binance, Kraken, Bitcoin.com, they're all there. And he invited them into the sandbox, excuse the pun, in the Middle East, there's a lot of sand, to innovate.
Yeah.
And I was on with them literally 2 days ago with our investment we're looking at in terms of the digital bank. And the gentleman there who leads the digital asset area said, we start with saying yes, and then we say no, versus more regulators start with a no until you get to a yes. And
Wow.
And they're willing to take that risk, but obviously they've isolated that division away from the other regulator in Dubai called the Dubai International Financial Center. So there isn't kind of collateral damage if other things happen. But everything virtual asset now will go through in Dubai through that regulator.
Seems like a perfect time for you to launch Meta Impact Capital. Tell us about your fund and your focus.
Yeah, it's a traditional VC fund. It's targeting 100 million. We've anchored it with 20. We've identified 3 or 4 key investments now, one in which is a digital-based bank. Okay, so we're not just talking about fintech. We're talking about a bank that is a fintech, which gives us a lot of opportunities for arbitrage. And to my earlier point, allows us to move quickly and adapt maybe quicker than some of the more traditional onshore banks in the US. It's Puerto Rican bank based, and we are looking at setting up something in Switzerland similar to that. But the fund itself is allocated between gaming, and if anyone knows anything about the metaverse, it all started coming from the early days of gaming with Roblox and Fortnite, and in that journey in Dubai, I hung around a lot of gamers. In fact, I was supporting a gentleman in Dubai who created an interesting platform called PlayMonk. And he was an Indian guy, and he was building a kind of a LinkedIn approach to gaming where people could come together and compete against each other, both in the physical way where they go and have physical competition games at cafes, and then in the virtual side. So when I think back about those days and what's happening now, I could see the interaction between real people getting together to build communities around gaming in the physical sense and then in the virtual sense. And I don't think I have to tell anyone on this podcast that, when Amin, who owned this firm called PlayMonk, he sponsored a firm or worked closely with a firm in Korea, which is a huge gaming area, right? Called Genji. And they, in 2000, I think it was 19 or 18, they had the league, I think it was Fortnite or League of Legends World Tournament at one of the big stadiums filled with 30,000 people physically. But what really amazed me was the fact that were streaming in almost 400 million people, which means that makes like the US Super Bowl look like a sideshow compared to the volume. So when you think about, and in that part of the world, I have to tell you, at the esports champions are put at the highest regards, even above physical NBA basketball players and everything else. They really admire the skill and technology of these gamers.
Yeah.
And as an extension of that, as you know, JiNan, that you start building communities with these people around the world. And you start hearing these cases where these young gamers out of Des Moines, Iowa are starting to learn Japanese from working with and gaming and building communities and competing with teams in these kind of gaming areas. And then I think that naturally led to the immersion of social engagement competition in this first steps of what I call the metaverse.
Yeah, esports is here to stay. I don't think that genie's going back in the bottle. So to speak. Like esports is big. Yeah.
So the fun starts with gaming around a 35% allocation. Then we move into fintech related complicated areas and arbitrage areas in fintech around 30. Yeah. Education's a big one, JiNan, and you know that. Yeah. And this isn't just education for schools. This is education for the elderly. I mean, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and it just dawned on me that when people get nervous around the metaverse and the amount of time people spend, and they're worried that's, again, yet another excuse not to interact with people.
Yeah.
I was amazed to hear that today, more people spend time in the US watching traditional TV than they do in gaming or on their iPhones or on their screens. So what the strategy here is, you're going to reduce your exposure and time in traditional television and pivot that time more into immersive types of opportunities and activities. So you can go into metaverse and watch a movie with friends. You can engage with them together. And just think about all these elderly people in nursing homes, or us baby boomers who eventually, me at least, when I go, instead of spending 8 hours watching soap operas or nursing homes, you can actually go on quests and journeys with people through that technology. So I think people maybe misunderstood Mark Zuckerberg, describes this nicely in a lot of his recent podcasts, where you are starting to get that point where it's almost real, and feeling real is more impactful and more educational than consuming. And there's a big change when you watch TV and you're on your iPhone with traditional Web 2.0 things, you're consuming and lightly engaging. But when you're building and creating and immersing with other people, you're experiencing. And they say, and I'm still checking this out, that you can retain 30% more in an immersive type of experience and learning than you could in just consuming information.
So the implications to retain your memory, to even expand your dendrites and form new cells, maybe even your brain is there. And I think that would be a great gift for the elderly and probably for all of us in any case. Yeah, it's interesting that it's replacing TV, which is just a consuming thing for sure. I don't know if you've spent much time on Metaverse yet. I'll confess that my first experience after about 5 minutes just on some of the immersive YouTube, I did get the sensation of being in the middle of it, whether it was in Florence, Italy, and then looking down and realizing like, oh my gosh, I'm on a ledge. When I knew actually I was in my living room, was sort of surprising, or to have the sensation even of flying up a waterfall, right? Just really interesting experiences that also has not much of a carbon footprint, right? Because you
Correct.
can travel without all of that extra footprint on the planet. Some good benefits from Metaverse for sure. But you've invested already in an education company. Do you care to speak about it?
Gleek, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a very interesting company. We warehoused it to go into the fund when we get formally regulated next week.
Mhm.
It's really a nice way of mentorship in a way. It's an NFT approach where people are coming together and they get an NFT for mentoring other people who have skills and tech in certain areas, and bringing communities together for training and educating people. JiNan, who is the CEO of that firm, is also an active in working in the Middle East, where she's based in Sharjah, on educating the next gen around programs. But there's two different angles here. There's an angle on the education, traditional way of teaching people about the metaverse, but then there's the concept of building communities through mentorship, and how there's so many people out there who would love to engage with the next generation and share their gifts.
Yeah.
And it's done in a way where they can have their own NFT, and people would try to buy that NFT because you create a market for your skill, right?
Yeah.
And some people might attribute that to philanthropy, just give it away. But other people may find it a way to have another revenue source, but people would value someone's skill. So for example, you're an expert in IP, you have a good understanding of VC and startups. And if I'm a startup and I don't have a clue about a provisional patent, your value would go up exponentially, and people would try to buy into that value that you can offer them. And you can offer them as a gift, or you can charge them through this NFT kind of mechanism. So I thought that was kind of a creative way to bring people together.
Very creative. I love it. Sally Ann is wonderful as a CEO and just brilliant also at connecting people. So tell us a little bit about your point of view on intellectual property. And I know we talk from time to time on patents and branding, but there sometimes is a lot of question about whether or not it's possible to have intellectual property alongside this new Web 3.0, even fintech. Do you think it's important to still?
Oh, it's fundamental. And I think anyone who's been down the journey or read your book knows that IP is very fundamental, and people don't understand what IP really is. It isn't just writing a check to a law firm to say, issue this kind of, patent or provisional patent. It's really understanding the strategy around it. Who else is in the space? How do you build the moat around what you're doing? In fact, even the value can create in a patent just because of the way you position it, right? And I think this whole Web 3.0 is going to be a huge area, because the blockchain, and I'm not talking about the immersion stuff. Everyone knows that a lot of the metaverse is going to be built off people's creativity and NFTs and their artwork and their design, which isn't, and the key word in all this, I think, is decentralization.
Yes.
We're moving into a world where people don't want to be controlled by the big tech companies. They want to create, build, design, and create value for themselves, and use their own data and own their own data and be part of it.
That's right.
And I think that plays into the crypto angle as well, because, a lot of this stuff is, there's billions of dollars are transacting in the metaverse through wearables and other things that have value. And we all know many of those transactions are done through Ethereum or other related cryptocurrencies. And if we can build the on and off ramp to transact. And for example, within our fund, we have a very talented gentleman called Lauren Rusendahl. At 11 years old, he had up in his room, he had 3 million people playing his game.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
He is the founder of Bright Star Studios. He built Planet Quest, and we're talking to him now. He's on our investment committee to buy real estate in his game. So people realize that we're going to even talk to him about possibly putting a bank in his game.
Yeah.
So people can seamlessly open up and transact in a new kind of Web 3.0 experience of a bank that would look nothing like you and I understand a bank to be, right?
Yeah, it's so compelling to think about that. I mean, there are all of these, not just new businesses, but imagine the new roles people will play in a global economy through the virtual connections, right? That's just astonishing. It's great to think about. Tell us about what else you're interested in. I know that you're not exclusive just to these tech-related areas. What other industries or things are capturing your interest as an investor or as just a person of curious mind?
Another area I really find fascinating is, and I didn't really understand this until I ran into another gentleman who's had done amazing things in Africa with water. Okay. He's a Stanford grad. He ran the Stanford labs. He took 2 companies public in medical devices. And he kind of thought back and said, what's my purpose? And he believed that God gave him a blessing of brilliance. And he had a vision to impact 1 billion people by 2030 through water. And he created a device through UV light going through 28 chambers, which he's for the last 12 years has been bringing these devices into Ethiopia, into Sierra Leone, to serve the underserved and the poor. People were dying with just bad water. Yeah. And it's not new wells, it's taking bad water to good water. Well, that journey, interesting, led him or someone finding out about him in Texas for fracking. And he became the world's leader in cleaning fracking water without the use of chemicals. And that led into him going in the air for air purification during this COVID period. But which is interesting is through another relationship I had connecting the dots, we're looking at an opportunity to invest in an aquifer in Utah and create some of the purest water that's coming out of the ground that we will bottle for some of the resorts out there. But more importantly, using that same tech, we are looking at another opportunity in Sharjah, which is another Emirates next to Dubai, to do a pilot for a smaller scale program of water purification. Now, I think many people don't realize that a lot of the municipal water that we drink, it has a lot of trace chemicals in it. And I'm not sure people fully understand the extent and how those carcinogens and other things could be, bad for you. And you see what's going on right now in the US with Lake Mead being down at historic low levels. Water is going to be an area of intrigue and focus. Even California recently passed Title 22 that's allowing the whole concept of toilet to table water. The technology is there to just recycle it more efficiently, energy efficient. And when I think about living in the Middle East for 8 years, one of the richest Emirates of the world, I lived on the Palm, that famous thing that went on the ocean. I lived on a frond. My friends would come over from the US. They think we're great. You can't drink the water out of the tap. After about a week of a shower, you're off, your hair's scratchy. It's all that desal and, not the very poor infrastructure to support basic water. And there's a whole business over there of water in these jugs that go around. And there's got to be better, efficient ways to bring, I think, water to people. And even in some of the wealthiest parts of the world, they have water challenges. So that's just another area of interest for me.
Yeah, and certainly throughout emerging markets, as I've traveled globally, it's just commonplace that you would wash your hands and then use a hand sanitizer because the water just not clean and needing bottled water for brushing your teeth, et cetera. But yeah, we need water to survive, and all of our plants, animals, farms require good quality water, right?
Yeah.
That's an important area. I love what you're doing. I know you also, as a person of faith, how is your faith, beyond everything you've said, how is your faith driving some of your investment philosophy?
Oh, well, that's the core of it all, right? That's the journey, right? Back to my earlier point about relationships. God made us all very unique, and he has a purpose for everyone, right? And I think sometimes you always call me the connector, but that's really less than me. That's really, everyone has great strengths and great weaknesses and areas and improvement. And if you can build relationships globally and drive those and build that sense of trust over time in your faith and help people in your journey, it's very biblical that you'll be blessed 10 times back again, right? So this isn't about Paul Gyra. This isn't about deals. This isn't about me. It's sowing into opportunities. The water project is saving lives in Africa because I see the passion of what this guy's doing, and he's given a blessing. So my role is to help him achieve what he wants to achieve in his vision for something bigger. Yeah. The metaverse stuff I can see is a great way to engage with the millennials, the Gen Zs, how they'll experience God through maybe a different way than maybe a traditional church in a way, or feel alienated. They could enter a world with an avatar and feel more open to share in ways to strengthen. And I think God makes everything for a purpose, including technology. So I don't find it as an inhibitor. Sometimes I find traditional religion being an inhibitor to letting the full beauty of God's kingdom come out the way it should be globally.
Fair point. Fair point. And I mean, everything can multiply in good ways if they're used properly. And of course, if we're thoughtful about how we deploy technology and science alike, for sure. One of the things that I remember you sharing with me is, beyond your global travels for investing, you've had a couple of global adventures too. Care to talk about any hiking trip or?
Oh yeah. Well, like all of us, I came from a large family of 8 children in Vermont. And I never really had a chance to see the world, but my father was very international early on before he got married, and he'd been around the world. And I just had that bug to do that. So I went and I worked in Ernst & Young in London. As you know, I was in the financial service side in the 80s, which was the beginning of the derivatives markets. And it was the go-go time. And I was getting up at 6 a.m. and working at 2 a.m. Every day for like 3 years. And I just said, enough's enough. I was almost too busy to go find another job, but I never wanted to be a partner in one of these firms. So I just woke up one day and I said, I'm just done. You got to stop. So I said, I'm going to take a sabbatical. And I went and I set out a map to see the world a little bit. I went into Nepal and I tracked the Annapurnas, the 7 sanctuary mountains of that. I saw the Tibetans, the refugee camps, whatever. And again, I walk into Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. I'm sitting there all by myself. I tend to travel by myself, not because I'm an introvert, but when you do extreme things that are long and complex, and you tend to easier to do it yourself because you can pace yourself. One thing about trekking in Nepal is you can be subject to high altitude sickness at the levels I was going at, right? So if you went with a partner and you walk a month into the mountains and they can't make it, you got to walk back with them, right? So if you go by yourself with a Sherpa, then that's the better way. And I was so blessed to have this guy, Raj, who was my Sherpa, and he spoke English. It was unbelievable. He was taught at a Christian school in Kathmandu, and we just had a wonderful time. In fact, we had such a good time that we were talking up the trails. We have all the Europeans try to follow us because Raj would explain the mountains to them in English in a language they could understand, because the other Sherpas couldn't speak the language, couldn't speak English. So we'd have to get up at like 3 a.m. and just take off ourselves just to drop all these people. But that was one journey. And then another time I was into cycling, and I cycled all from Nice to Naples, one year, all the way around the whole horseshoe to Europe. But then you get the real experience of the Italian Riviera and the people, and so those are great. Like I told you before, JiNan, life is about planning, right? And if you're in the right country at the right age at the right time, that's unbelievable. I was in Australia as single, enjoying life right out of college. I could never bring that back again, right? I worked with Jeffrey Sachs on a project to privatize the Polish banking system. He hired Ernst & Young. So I was in Wrocław, Poland before the Berlin Wall came down, okay? Wow. And working with a bank to help privatize it with people who've had no idea of non-communist was about. That you can't replicate that today. When I was in Poland, Warsaw, that time, it was like one Western hotel. It was a Marriott in Warsaw at the time. Today, you go to Warsaw, it looks like Paris. It's everything. So these points in time are so critical. And if you can kind of throw yourself in the middle of the time opportunity, then that's the area. I chose to go to Dubai because 8 years ago, and I only thought I was going to be there several years because it was part of the world I never really got engaged with. And I really want to understand that Muslim culture meets Christian culture and some of those broader countries like Jordan and everything, and the Jewish culture. And what you're seeing today in Dubai is phenomenal in terms of the Abrahamic Accords, where you're seeing the Jewish coming together with the Muslims and the Christians to do business, and business for purpose and meaning is so much more important than geopolitical, politician stuff you see in that part of the world.
Absolutely. That's a great and inspirational way maybe to close us out today. Good advice for young people. Get out, travel, be in the right place at the right time, and opportunity will meet you there for sure. So Paul, tell us how to find out more about your fund, where to find you. It's metaimpact.com.
Yeah, our website's www.metaimpact.capital, not .com, but .capital. And you'll see our team. We've got, to your other point, JiNan, we just got, and you're part of our advisory board, but we just got a terrific team. I mean, we're spanning Japan, Hong Kong, Korea, Europe, London, New York. And I think this brain trust, which is relational trust, engaging, we can do really well for our investors, but we can also have a lot of fun and go on this journey together.
Yeah, I second that and welcome it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul. We appreciate you.
I appreciate you too.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Own Your Zone podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.